So, I mean, first of all, huge grats on the world first. I know so much work goes into that, and like getting all the practice in is one thing, but actually executing it when it's time to race, that's a whole different ballgame. So, huge grats on that. Well deserved.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was actually probably one of the easiest races I've done as
Really?
well as this. Yeah, as well as this might seem. Not necessarily like how demanding it is or like what is required of a player um, in the moment or whatever, right? But on a personal nerve level, it was so easy for me. Um, I mean, the amount of hours that we put in was insane, and that's why I mainly mainly what I wanted to show my eye bags, like bags under my
Mhm.
eyes, right? I'm a
Yeah.
bit exhausted. Um, it was a very intense period of preparation for it. So a lot of people were like, especially like socials with the guild and friends and whatnot, right? Or people, or just random people, right? Were, as an example, this Lich King 5%, like when it's 15% on its berserk, and we kite it for 5%. We had done that so many times, and we are completely confident about it. That was just a general, like, little example I wanted to get from there. I never felt so relaxed in a race before and so well prepared about it.
Wow, that's actually crazy to hear. I thought this might be one of well, I thought it would be the most difficult race for you guys, but um
I have to say, this might be a weird thing. Again, just as weird as saying that ICC was easy for me, Talk was the
mhm,
hardest that has ever been on me on like the nerve level for some reason. I don't
mhm.
know. I can't explain it, but that's how it was.
I mean, yeah, it's like I can't even imagine like the nerves you've got for that. Like, I mean, I'm doing pretty small potatoes like streaming and rating, and I mean sometimes I get nervous too. Like I'm not even like competing for like world first or anything. I can't even imagine for you when like everything's on the line. It's been like months of practice and it's so impressive that you guys like put that together.
Yeah, and I mean it was. I give a lot of props to like Beefbar and Nota who came second and third as well. Like, I mean, think about original Lich King, which was the world rank 2, was achieved a month later after the first was done, and in our case it was 3 minutes. So a single wipe on any boss would have been a deal breaker. Anything, right? We were kind of fortunate in the sense that we had a super clean run compared to others. It wasn't like a perfect run. We had deaths here and there, and some stuff happened badly, but took it calmly. Just did some basic stuff. It was kind of a steady thing. Some other guilds tried some fancy stuff, especially Nota. We didn't. We just went in, blasted, did our thing, what we practiced, and enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was actually gonna be another one of my questions. How did this run compare to like some of your PTR practice runs? Was this like your cleanest run you had of like any of your practice runs, or where did this kind of
So,
rank compared to what you did in practice?
so to give context, we didn't kill Lich King that many times on PTR, even though it was 3 weeks of PTR, kinda, quote unquote. Um, Maybe less than 10 times. But just the run before the PTR closed on the third time, we actually had our only full run with no wipes, just no breaks. We just went at it. I think it was like 1 hour, 50 minutes, something like that. So we were faster this time. Obviously, you don't pace it as much. You do like kind of rehearse some stuff on the voice before, some pulls and whatnot. Um, it reflects a lot, kind of, this run, how our Sunwell speedrunning went, where a lot of people got shocked. Like, we were really good in Sunwell speedrunning, but a lot of people were shocked to the fact that we never had a run on PTR from start to finish, like ever. And it was a really rough PTR, a really big amount of sweat and tears and blood, so to speak. And it's all kind of just clicked in the race. It's just kind of unreal still. I wasn't expecting it for sure because I thought, well, I think this goes for like all guilds who race. They think that your opponents have some fucking crazy tech or whatever. Pardon my language. Um,
Oh, you're totally fine.
just just like Nota had, right? Like they had some crazy tech with the Magisters there summon, um, which obviously was their demise. Firstly, So you have that feeling always in the back of your head that, right? You always try to be confident and whatnot, but we didn't really have any major tech in this run. We just wanted to go for something that was consistent. So that's why I didn't feel like we would necessarily win. I felt like we had a good solid chance. The percentages were like in our favor in that sense. A lot of people didn't believe in us. A lot of the big streamers, the predictions all had us like below 20% before Nota were like all ahead of us in those predictions and what people were talking about. Um, but yeah, ended up having like this, and I've probably never been this happy in my whole life. Um, I had such a nice time yesterday after the race. I pretty much almost instantly just closed my PC. I had put the sauna to warm before the run. Went directly to the sauna. My best IRL friend who, um, very close friend of mine, came over. Had some drinks in the cold, and then we ended up staying up until like 9 a.m. Just having like best night ever. Even though it didn't involve any time on the PC after that. Um, I'm not sure if I'll feel it like this ever again, since in all honesty, Lich King ICC is like the biggest thing in the whole classic. I don't think there has been anything, or I don't think there will be anything that is as big and hyped and respected as this raid, right? Like it is the biggest, baddest boss raid that you'll ever have in classic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is the peak. I mean, in terms of like difficulty, nostalgia, just the fact that Lich King's wrapping up the whole like Warcraft 3 story. There's just so many things going into it that make this like the race you want to win, right? But so I wanted to touch on a couple things you mentioned there. So first off, you mentioned like a lot of people were giving you guys like a lower chance of winning. Did that like fuel you guys at all? You felt like you had a lot more to prove because of that?
I think we mostly laughed at it, and it's not like it's it's not that we don't believe that we wouldn't win or we would believe that we would win or whatever. It's just that people who don't play in these guilds or like go through the process that we do, like they don't understand what are the factors and all these things. It's just like sports, right? It's well, literally kind of. Um, you just predict something based on previous results or whatever, right? Like they have no idea how things have been through. And I'm not saying that our PTR was easy. It was most certainly extremely rough. Um, but people don't really understand these things. It's the same thing as Beefbar, right? What happened to us is that I really like looked at their run, and I feel like them winning and being in that situation that progress has been for a long time, it kind of the pendulum shifted, right? Like they felt the pressure of the favorites, so to speak. I don't think we had that. And I think for a lot of our roster, winning the last tier was a pretty big one, since the guild hasn't won since Black Temple, right? That's a long time ago. Um, a lot of the people in the guild aren't the same players as it was back then. There for sure are multiple, but yeah, having won, I think at least for me, put it on an easier position. That's why I was just like, well, I'm not really into like whole Twitch culture and whatnot. I don't go around on Discords, whatever, right? I just kind of do my own thing. So people just don't know. Like, how can you predict something you have no idea about? Like, that was the main point why I was like kind of laughing about it. I don't think people really cared about it in the guild, honestly.
Okay. Yeah. Do you watch any sports at all?
Yeah, I'm a huge hockey fan.
Okay. You're probably used to it that there's people on TV, giving their opinions on like, who the best players are, what teams have chances of winning. And most of like the pundits talk about that have no clue, what actually goes into it and, you know, who's actually good, all that kind of stuff. So it kind of seems like same thing is going on here
Yeah, I
with
mean,
WoW, right?
it's content for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Of course
Yeah,
they're gonna do it,
exactly.
even if they have like they might even be conscious of it that they have no fucking clue about it. But of course they're gonna do it for content, right? Obviously that's understanding. But a lot
That's
of
how they make
people,
money, yeah.
yeah, but a lot of people take a lot of these, so to speak, entertainment streamers. I view you as mostly like an educational streamer, which I respect a lot. But a lot of these kind of content streamers in a way where they just like entertain people, like act silly and whatnot. People who on hardcore die on purpose for views, clickbait, stuff like that. They say the stuff for content and entertaining people. And people sometimes, some people do take it seriously. They think that that's the truth. And so that's obviously something that you kind of get to understand when you play in these, like, and see the whole thing behind the veil. And it's not that like different. I think we're just a normal guild, but we just put an immense amount of work. Um, Normal players, we just work way harder and more. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you for the shout out there. Actually, for a long time, like you've been in my chat for like quite a while, and I actually didn't know who you were until recently. You like had mentioned it, and I was like, I thought you were trolling me at first when you said you were like the progress MT, and when I realized it, I was like, holy shit! I to me like that's one of the most like flattering things ever that like you would be somebody actually watching my stream because I do try to like help like tanks out, try to help them to, improve at the game and stuff like that. But it was like honestly shocking when I found out like you were one of the people like watching my stream sometimes.
It's I have to say, I'm very honest that I'm extremely lazy when it comes to like finding out information and whatnot. And the stuff that you put out, it's like even after like in hindsight stuff that you put out, it's like 99% agree. And then I just trickle in some of my own stuff in there, like adjust it for the environments that I play and stuff like that.
Yeah,
You do great
absolutely.
work, and I appreciate your work a lot. And I think mostly my time playing a Prot Paladin, I've been basing a lot of my stuff regarding gear and talents and whatnot on your stuff.
Damn. I mean, that's like the coolest thing I've ever heard. I mean, like I mean, I'm kind of speechless. Like that's so fucking cool that you like my stuff and you even like, even in progress, like you said 99% of the stuff. Obviously that's just a number thrown out there, but I mean that's just so cool to me. Um yeah. So I wanted to get back to man, you mentioned a lot of stuff. So on PTR you said I think you said like an hour 50 was like your guys' best time.
Yeah, and that was like our only time.
Your only
That is
time. Okay.
our
And
only full run. Yeah,
And then this one, I believe it was like 135, something like that. Is
yeah,
that right?
134,
134?
134. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so I mean, like that's a significant difference. And you mentioned too, like the nerves before, like having like a 150 is like you said your only time to run. Like that's incredible. Like to like overcome those nerves, knowing like you only had one time to run before that too. Like, I mean, I can't say enough about just how, like, crazy that is. Like, the amount of pressure on you as a main tank, like, in that environment, that race environment, like, pulling everything off. And you even said, like, this was, like I think you said the least stress you've been in a world first race? That's, like, astounding.
Yeah, well, I come from a big line of retail experience. I've always played the game. I played retail on a like not at the same level as I'm playing classic now, but at a understandably high level. And the game is getting to a point where I'm really, really getting to enjoy these fights and actually having to and getting to do stuff, having stuff to press and whatnot. That's one of the parts why I just pure-heartedly enjoyed it so much. Another thing about the PTR versus reality for us versus the live, obviously, is that we play PTR on any realms, right? So it is extremely punishing for us to play. Um, let's say Defile is a great example. When I'm playing with 250 MS, it is so punishing because you'll like have less time to react. Plus, when you're running out of it, sometimes the game just thinks that your character's in it, even though on your screen it isn't, just because of the MS. So when we go to
Right.
live servers, our DPS is usually like anywhere from 2 to 5% more like better, just because of the MS and everything. It's always like this. All races, all speedrun practice, everything always the same. That PTR is a shit fest, like when it comes to a lot of stuff, just because of the MS and whatnot. And then retail is just so much smoother, like live, sorry. It's just so much smoother and easier to roll in with. A lot of the
Yeah,
times we would have these copium moments, so to speak, where like we would wipe on 1%, like, oh yeah, but we'd kill it on live, right? Because the DPS is,
sure,
we
sure.
just know, like it's just the fact the DPS is always better a bit on live. So I don't think a lot of people were concerned. Like we had nailed bosses a lot, like really well. We just didn't have like a start to finish run, except for that one. That was like the only thing that was missing. We had a lot of issues. Well, issues, just unfortunate timings. Our main disc priest was away for the second and third PTR, so we had one of our players who has been like he has been in the guild since vanilla and a really stable player. Really like that guy. Shout out for Shine. He stepped in as a disc with like very low disc experience in Wrath. He stepped in there and did an amazing job. Stuff like that happened to us, and we overcame it mainly.
Wow, that's actually crazy. Like disc is such an important role, like in this race for sure. And I mean, yeah, for sure. Shout out to that guy. Well done, well done. Um, so I think we kind of glossed over it, but I wanted to just like go over your like WoW background really quick. Like, how long have you been playing the game? How long have you been in progress? And like, what world first races have you been a part of?
So this December marks my 18th year of WoW. I'm currently 23 and I'm about to turn 24. So I've been playing this game since I turned 6. I got it as my 6th birthday back in that was during like the AQ patch or something. In original vanilla, my dad was playing, my godfather, which is my uncle, was playing, so I was playing with them a lot, and that's how I got into the game. Took me a while to get to a good level on like Warlords of Draenor. I started to become a little bit better and got into challenge modes, the challenge mode dungeons, and ended up getting some world rank ones there. Um, then in Legion, I had some okay stuff. I played in the MDI Mythic Dungeon Invitational. Was a great experience. Um, Nothing notable on retail apart from like just like some. I wouldn't like call it extraordinary. I have some like world top 20 kills on retail. Yeah, back in Legion. Um, been okay at PvP. Got some gladiators, heroes of hero of the horde, stuff like that. Um, Dungeons have always been a great enjoyment for me on retail. Then in Classic, I started playing it, and I really do enjoy this version of the game. I don't really enjoy the direction that the game has gone through. Um, and it was about, I think, what would I say, 20 months ago when I applied and joined Progress, and I was in for the first race immediately, almost, for Sunwell Plateau. And after that, I've been tanking every single race.
Wow, pretty good list of accomplishments. Damn, you started playing when you were 6. You've been playing WoW almost as long as me, and I'm 32 right now. When I was 6, I was playing Nintendo 64. That's what just came out when I was 6. That's wild. You're you've been training your whole life for it, I guess, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know any better, right? It's
Right?
an
Yeah.
it's not a very hard position to be in.
Yeah, that's impressive. So first race was Sunwell, and you've been in all of them since then. Nice. And have you played a tank the entire time you've played WoW, or at least the entire time you've played at like a higher level?
So the entire time I have been in Progress, yes. Apart from that, like just occasionally, not really. I have been just playing whatever has been needed. And tanks on retail is just like a different kind of thing. Tanking on retail for the longest time was fairly easy, in my opinion. Like in relation to what is the difficulty difference between playing a DPS or a healer and playing a tank. Tanking is fairly easy on retail versus playing DPS or healer on retail, and it's not even close. So I wasn't really needed on tank ever. And then when I joined Progress, I didn't have a set role that I applied with. I just wanted to play in the guild. And I had 3 characters at the time. One was a Holy Paladin, a feral druid tank and an enhancement shaman. And then with Xander, who is like the one of the main bosses in the guild, he just said that we'll just figure it over time, right? And just ended up as the tank really quickly. I'm not sure why. Maybe they're a little bit crazy in the head how they let me to do it, but yeah, it just kind of happened. Just like this, just like before, I was doing something that I was needed to be doing, just simply put.
Wow. So in TBC, were you a feral druid or were you a prop ally?
I was a feral druid the entire time. My co-tank for the longest time was Windforce, who has been like the
Okay,
big
yeah.
man tank in the guild. Yeah, and now he's like big in the hardcore scene. He just got the
Hmm.
world first Kel'Thuzad hardcore with Frontier. Really nice guy. Had a good time with him in Sunwell. He was the paladin man back then. We actually ended up like it was a funny thing where the tank situation in the guild was pretty dire. We didn't have a third tank at all, so we ended up two tanking the Sunwell speedruns, me and him together. And people thought that it was a conscious decision, and then they were trying to do it as well. We played really well together. We didn't ever feel like it was hard, but people said that it's hard. That they had the perception of it. But we did it well, and I had some really good times back then about it. Feral Druid on TBC isn't very like it's not the most exciting thing, but once again, played whatever was what was needed. I was very lucky to be able to play Prot Paladin in Wrath. It's like by far my favorite thing to do in Wrath. I absolutely love it, how it works. It's so good.
Yeah. I mean, Yoko told me. I absolutely agree. It's my favorite version of any class in any WoW expansion, I think. So it's
Yeah,
just such a good time.
wait until you get to play Prot Paladin in MOP is all I have to say.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been hearing about that. I think you were telling me about that actually the other day
Yeah,
on stream.
it's like
Yeah.
it is unreal how good and fun that is, and it is incredibly broken as well. I I really hope that the game develops into like Cataclysm and MOP, obviously, so I'd get to play that again. I did play a fair bit of Prot Paladin in MOP, but I was a kid back then, so I think I'd have a better time doing it this time around.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to Cat and Mop myself. I think Mop was my favorite expansion of all of them. Wrath probably second, but man, if
Yeah,
they
I
do
agree
Mop,
with
I'm
you.
pumped.
Yeah, MOP is an amazing expansion.
So you mentioned briefly about like in Sunwell, like your kind of tank combo. I just wanted to segue that into what you guys did for Heroic Lich King. You guys did two prop allies, and I didn't really understand it, but a lot of people were hating on prop allies for that fight, and it didn't really make a lot of sense to me because I thought prop ally was amazing. I was saying double prop ally I thought would be the best, but everybody was like really pushing the double blood DK. But just with the amount of utility, especially for that specific fight that prop ally brings, I figured it'd be good with like the MPOG and DSAGs, hand sags, all that stuff.
Sure.
So was that did you guys try other like tank comps or was that just kind of the only one you ran with and it was just working really well for you? Or like, what led to that decision?
So just to start it off, I'm the like in the officers of progress. I'm the guy who takes care of the tank stuff. And before we even set foot in ICC, I was aware of the strengths and the benefits of playing a double paladin on Lich King. So it was like a thing, just pull the trigger and it will happen instantly. But we did go on that boss with a blood DK instead of the other Proth Paladin, Caps, which is the other tank in the guild. He was playing the DK obviously as well as the Paladin. Um, the biggest reason why we had the DK there was we couldn't really test even playing a double Prot Paladin because our enhancement shaman Anfal was away during the first PTR. We're kind of locked into that. But the second PTR of Anfal was there, and the third obviously, so we could test it. The DK tank certainly is better, especially for the first phase. Paladin is extremely shaky tanking Lich King with high stacks because it just doesn't have a good health pool and the cooldowns are a bit lacking versus a DK. So we did run into a lot of Avenger shields, even just straight up deaths. So that is the only
Aren't
only
defenders, you mean?
yeah AD
Okay,
procs, right?
gotcha.
Yeah, so that is definitely the weakness. I think I would say the only weakness of the Paladin tank in that role, right? That a Druid or a DK would fill the phase one. But going into phase two, further and further, I was just like, I want to get that second Prot Paladin in there. And a big factor in that, like you mentioned the DSAC, sure. We didn't even use the second Prot Paladin DSAC for, we didn't use it for the Infest. We used it for me. And vice versa, I used my DSAC for Gabs when he was taking Soul Reapers. Um, it's so strong when you don't cancel right. We would cover a Soul Reaper with a hand sack for the initial when you know the application of it, and then you would hand sack raid sack no canceler the buff part, and it was so stable. Obviously a big thing again is the 4-set from tier 9, which is absolutely amazing for Lich King Soul Reapers. It is so good because it just lines up well. You know, it's a 30-second CD
Right.
ability Soul Reaper, right? But a semi-unknown thing. It's not that unknown, but Paladin still has the ability Seal of Justice, and having an off tank just doing Seal of Justice on every single Falc wave steadily, it is just amazing because you just proc those 3-second stuns on them so reliably, and then you have two Paladins doing it. It was just really nice. Um, the Paladin is nice for the last phase. Just general. I don't think there's much difference to the other tanks, but the big thing about having a Paladin mainly tank the boss in phase 2 is RNG as well, because sometimes you know you can just get cocked really hard. 3 healers get grabbed, maybe even worse. It's your 3 holy paladins that get grabbed, and the paladin is just so good for that because your passive mitigation is just way more better than other tanks just because of talents and whatnot. And then you have the AD. In that scenario, you have the AD, but if you're a DK tank or a druid tank which just relies on getting healed, getting pumped, you're just kind of screwed.
Right. Yeah. I've heard people like downplay AD, but I don't think those people really have ever played a prop ally. Like some of the things it lets you get away with, like the biggest part of it is that it keeps you alive during like unpredictable bursts. Like, I mean, you can like know burst is coming, pop a CD for it, but sometimes like some crazy RNG just happens and AD saves your ass. And like, I mean, another tank just dies there. Like, it's hard to like overstate like the value of it. Like AD is just like the most broken thing I think they've ever given a tank in the game.
Yeah, and I don't think people really realize, but Lich King hits for over 40k per melee attack,
Yeah.
and especially during the Soul Reaper, it's like I'm not sure if it's exactly 1 or just below 1 second swing timer. He claps you pretty hard.
Yeah, it's 0.9
And
seconds, I believe, when he's got the Soul Reaper
yeah,
buff,
yeah,
and you have an attack speed debuff up.
yeah, it is pretty rough, and the AD is nice if you just like sometimes in the race people think we're like some robots or whatever. Like we make just normal mistakes like anyone else. If you would just have a straight up oopsie, you just didn't use your cooldown for the application. That was like the main procer of AD. Whenever cooldowns weren't used appropriately, there was some very rare occasions where it would like proc during the Soul Reaper buff, even when the cooldowns were used appropriately, just because of how hard the boss hits. Um, it was just something extremely stable for Lich King, and a big part of the swap, the benefit of it as well, was the ability to get the 10% armor buff from Alterac Valley. Since obviously I had mine at the start of the race, but since I'm there at the start of the race, you're gonna lose the uptime. It's a 30-minute buff that just gives you flat 10% scaling armor. It has no diminishing returns or doesn't scale from base armor or whatever. It's just an amazing thing, like especially for the phase 1 thing. And Caps obviously tanks Lich King in the phase 1, gets 10% more armor. It's like more than an armor pot on top of an armor pot. Just pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's
And
nuts.
yeah, it is. It really is.
I didn't know that was still a thing.
Yeah, it
I'll
was
have to do
essentially
that.
like beef partex, so to speak. They used it in the TOC race. They just kind of got inspired by that, and yeah, we did it for this race as well. So really, really good buff, and I think it would be helpful for a lot of guilds who just want to invest that maybe 10-minute period for the tanks. If you're like really close at killing the boss and want to go that extra step deeper, just have your tanks get the buff quickly from AV. You just return 20 armor scraps, and it will help you so much on that hard fight. It just claps the tanks really hard.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I for some reason I thought that didn't work anymore in Wrath, but that's really good to know. So I forgot to ask, when did you guys get your first heroic Lich King kill on PTR? Was it during the first testing period?
We were really close during the first one. I think like 5% off of the, or 4% off of the death, so to speak. So it was like 14 or 15% when we wiped. But on the second one, we started rolling them, and on the third one, it became better and better gradually. So it's really hard to track of how many times you actually kill the boss, because you sometimes we'd wipe intentionally, since if you kill the boss, you waste all those attempts that you built up.
Right.
Since the rest of the raid relatively so much easier than Lich King itself, getting those attempts for Lich King was just so effective, because it still took you a while to clear the raid, and just practicing slamming pulls on Lich King was so valuable.
Yeah, yeah. That was another thing I wanted to ask. Like, did you guys intentionally wipe to save your attempts and keep practicing? But because like I heard lots of people saying like, oh, like nobody's like killed it on PTR at all, and I was like, I think they probably have. They were just like intentionally wiping because like if you kill it when you have 30 attempts remaining, you have to re-clear the entire raid just to keep practicing the hardest part. So
Yeah,
um
it wasn't very relevant for a while. Like it took us a while. Like I said earlier, we're not robots. I think it took us a fair bit of like, this is completely my gut feeling. I'm not a very statistics guy, and I don't think there was any benefit of it either to like calculate it or see an exact amount. But this is my gut feeling, is that we had like somewhere around 200 pulls that it took us to kill the boss. Either like just below or just above. I'm not sure, but yeah, this is like my gut feeling about it.
around 200, and that's just on PTR.
Yeah, just on PTR.
Okay. Do you guys do like private server stuff too, like leading up to the PTR?
It's an interesting question, but this is a question that I will happily leave unanswered, unfortunately,
Okay.
for any
No,
people
no
interested.
worries. No
Yeah,
worries.
yeah.
Just going through my questions really quick, seeing if there's anything I missed. Is there anything you discovered in like regards to tanking while you were doing all this prog on the PTR that you wish you had known like a lot sooner? Um, I mean, you mentioned that tech already, like the AV armor buff tech. Anything else like, that isn't immediately obvious to people, but something you figured out that made a big difference on anything?
I don't really think so. Like I said earlier about our ICC PTR in general, I think our groundwork was just very basic, but it was basically solid. That's how it is, right? And I had done a lot of prep for ICC in general, about like reading about stuff and trying to figure stuff out. I was really well prepared on, like, because that department is my responsibility, is the tanking. I think the tanking was fairly well constructed. I was aware of what classes go into what basket, so to speak.
Hmm.
So I don't feel like during the PTR uh, I'm trying to think about it, but I really don't think so that there was anything groundbreaking. Um, in regarding to tanks, there was some fun stuff that we and I figured out, but I can't really recall anything for this question particularly, since it was just
Well,
very
just
basic
more
stuff.
general stuff then. Like what were the things you figured out, like not just for tanks, but more general for like the whole raid?
I think one of the well, there aren't many, but one of the things that I personally thought and suggested is that we would use the armies on the Wild Spirits on last phase of Lich King, which just made it so smooth, and
I
it
noticed
is
that.
so yeah, it is so beneficial as well because you just end up moving the boss less, and it creates a thing where, because they fixate on random people just like the Freya Lashers, they work exactly the same way. They like build a base amount of threat and then just go on that person, and that the Wild Spirits can be taunted and all that, right? Um, just like Freya, you just put the army on them, and the best thing about the spirits and the armies, the Wild Spirits don't really do a lot of damage on them, so the armies can tank them entirety of their duration. Um, but it essentially creates a thing where the casters don't have to move, because when you do it the very traditional way, the casters have to be stacked on the ass of the boss, so that all the Wild Spirits are going to the same direction, so the tanks can actually soak them. But this created a lot of extra benefit for us when it came to that. It's not like a make it or break it thing, but it's something that I was really happy about.
Yeah, that seemed like a really good tech. I'm definitely stealing that one for my guild, 100%. Seemed to make everything much, much smoother.
Yeah, it was a like DK is obviously a great class, but it was one of the deciding factors of why we wanted the amount of DKs we had for Lich King. But a brilliant class. Obviously, it's gonna fall off the more gear people get, like other classes. But right now, for progression, stacking them is like so strong.
Yeah, they're pretty nuts. They have been most of the expansion. Um, is there any advice you'd give to like an average tank going into ICC? Not like, top of the line, world first raider, but just the average tank going in. Any like advice you'd give them to maybe make things easier for them?
I think not overcomplicating things is a big thing. Just like sticking to your basics. Uh, don't try to do any fancy stuff, and learn your cooldown timings really well. That's like that is so important in ICC. On many bosses, you want a set cooldown rotation that you can completely script it, and it just creates so much calmness and safety for your healers, especially since then they're able to do their job better. They don't have to put their extra resources into keeping you alive. Most of the bosses, except for like Gunship and Rotface, stuff like that, don't really require a lot of cooldown planning, so to speak. But
Sure.
cooldowns play an enormous role in in ICC, and doing that groundwork, learning when to use, how to use cooldowns, and you don't have these wipes where you just like, oh, I just flopped. But yeah, you used the cooldown, you didn't flop, then you got to progress a bit further. Um, there's a lot of like information that you can just study, watching videos or watching the logs. That is very, you can copy it very easily, since the abilities and stuff is becoming to be scripted. Like I said, it's becoming a retail style thing. So a lot of the stuff you can essentially just like copy. Yeah, as lame as that sounds, but yeah.
I do kind of like that more though when it's like very high stakes cooldown usage. Cause like a lot of things we've had in Classic so far, it feels like, you can throw your defensives out there just to use them. Like they aren't always terribly impactful. I like that we actually have some huge damage coming at us finally where it's like you need to use a defensive here or you're gonna die or, in prop high case, proc AD probably. But
I
it's
think the
definitely a nicer way to play, I think.
yeah the game so far has been very like reactive when it comes to tank cooldowns. You just press it when you need it. Um, but now it's like you need to use it for abilities that are like well in advance known. Only time that I've really like gone deeply into the tank cooldown stuff. This is obviously big props to our old big boss Gemt. It's like a big brain of progress for many years. Um, made a WeakAura for us for Algalon that was just like and a cooldown rotation. Um, we had essentially the whole 6 minute fight on the first night of Algalon, right? Um, going in there with tier 7 gear was pretty rough. like a lot of people took months, weeks to kill that boss, and they would accumulate gear from Ultra 25, Ultra 10. I went into Algon and all other tanks and our squad with 0 Ultra pieces. We just kill it with max loot. So I had to be a little bit creative. Beefbar, obviously, they beat us, but yeah, they had a little bit different way of approaching the boss when it came to that. They played 4 Holy Paladins, 6 healers in total, right? And we played 3 tanks and 5 healers. And the third tank's purpose was it was a prot warrior. It was just safeguard and strong cooldown usage. And we had a rotation of 100% the whole 6 minutes of a tanking tank with a cooldown up. And that was really fun. One of the best memories from the expansion when it comes to like this wonky stuff that had to figure out to beat these bosses since they're mathematically so hard early on with no gear. That was something that I wanted to mention here.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, early on, like, the numbers are kind of insane when you don't have the gear yet, and I think that's really cool, like, doing a little bit different tank strategy than normal. I think that's always fun. Um, let's see. So I wanted to just like kind of skim through your guys' like world first race clear. I have some footage from your demo lock, and I just wanted like not watch the entire like hour and a half thing, but like kind of skim through it, and you could like kind of point out some cool tech you did, and maybe anything that's not immediately obvious to people watching it.
Hmm.
Would that be
I
all
think
right? Or
it most certainly is all right.
okay,
Like I said, like I've been emphasizing,
yeah,
I think this is obviously hard because this is my only point of view, right?
uh huh,
Is what we did, right? I don't know
sure,
what is obvious for others and what isn't
okay,
for some, right?
yeah, yeah,
And like I said, I think a lot of the stuff that we did is very basic. We can
okay,
go through bosses if you like to ask any questions. I can answer them on the spot, but I
sure,
might not be able to realize myself that this is something extraordinary. It might
okay,
feel
yeah,
normal for me or normal for someone else, but it's like a hard point for me. But if we do it together, I think it should
right.
be a good thing.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I mean, I watched this last night, so I just there's really just kind of a few things I wanted to just at least take a look at and mention. Do you have the stream open right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, first off here, the Marrowgar trash pull. I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, I'm sure for you guys, pretty basic stuff. Most of us are like still trying to rep farm right now that aren't like doing world first race stuff. So we're clearing this trash, but this is a pretty awesome skip that I think a lot of people are gonna be doing once a lot of guilds don't need a rep anymore. And I watched Beef Bars also, and they actually killed these first two skeletons. I'm not exactly sure why.
I think that in general the skip is extremely volatile. Like this was not consistent
Oh,
at all
really?
whatsoever. Like
Okay.
this what happens here is that when the pack comes from the right, it's like first time it ever happened to us.
Oh,
Like
okay.
it was, you would always have something new that happened. And
Okay, interesting.
the mobs would just act in extremely weird ways that there was no explanation for. We'd never figure out why stuff happened. There's new stuff kept happening and happening. Um, we did have obviously some clean goals, but there was always something new coming up. Yeah, like I said, even in this race, we had something new coming up. You'd never like they would never leave you at rest. This pull. Um, it is a very unconventional pull. I would put it like that. But it saves you so much time. This trash is very very nasty when it comes to that. So it was 100% worth here. We had 2 people get killed, especially the spider mob since they cast the scarabs on people, just like good old strat mobs where they have a travel time, and those would break you out of the invis like cloaking
Oh,
device.
okay.
So we had 2 people die to it. We took our sweet time, like Discord was completely calm at this point. Like, yeah, just summon them and we'll pull. We were completely and utterly happy that we're here and we didn't wipe and didn't have to clear that trash. That was like our main goal about it. So there was like no big thing here, even though we did wipe. with like 2 people died, right? So that was an absolute success.
Yeah, first time you can kind of take a, sigh of relief. Like the race has
Yeah.
started on a pretty good note. So just to go over like the specifics of what you guys are doing there, I think I noticed you're fapping, you're rocket booting, you're no-wish cloaking devicing. Is that everything that's going into that?
Yeah, so the big part about the FAP, if like, I didn't FAP personally, since in the route that I was doing, there was never any traps, so I didn't have the FAP. But if I recall correctly, I'm not entirely sure about it, but I think it was to avoid the slow made by the trap, because you'd proc a trap
Right.
inside the silent, like invis, but you just wouldn't be slowed. Like that was the main part of it. I personally just used the Nifty. I had a pre-popped Sansa for that 5% extra movement speed. I Niftied, pulled them with Bubble when the bubble is about to end, Holy Wrath, and then Rocket Boots and Invis, cloaking device myself, and that's it. It's very simple. This was
Okay.
a bit, let's just put it like this. This boss was really, really shaky for us, the whole PTR, even though XD, it's the first boss of the raid, and a lot of people like to just go in there and kill it, but it was really rough. I don't know for why it was so rough for us, especially since now they fixed the spikes. Got really like scared whenever they announced that fix just before the race started. But
Mhm.
luckily our Marrowgar was certainly smooth in my experience.
Yeah, that's really interesting. In terms of like, ranking shakiest bosses, this would be near the top for you guys. I'm sure Lich King's number one.
No,
Oh,
that's the funny
really?
part. Yeah, I
Really?
think Deathbringer Saurfang was the like
Oh,
towards the end, right? Obviously, Lich King took a long time to progress and kill, but Lich King is extremely scripted. Like you can know exactly what happens. There's not a lot of alternatives on that fight. The only alternatives is like, okay, you just got your 3 healer scraps, right? But that is something that is extremely rare. It can happen, and it did happen for us, but um, didn't really have to think about it since you have no control over it. And we were well prepared in that sense that we had survived those scenarios. It's extremely brutal. You have to essentially throw in all cities, all hymns, all personal cooldowns, lay on hands, helping the infests and everything. But this boss was like kind of mid tier for us when it came to that, especially considering how easy it is, first boss of the raid. Then that makes the ranking like more respectable for this boss, I would say. But Deathbringer Saurfang was certainly the shakiest boss for us, like 100%.
all right. Yeah, we'll talk more about that once we get there. Anything in particular on like Deathwhisper? Any so it looks like pretty standard like trash pull here. You pull the whole metal together, AoE it all down. Um, I don't think there's anything really, any new tech there,
Yeah.
right?
The trash in general in ICC is extremely easy and chill in like my feeling. Like except for the um, vampire quarter, which the trash is absolutely brutal. Like
Yeah.
it is so punishing, and I died on that trash. It wasn't because of my own fault. It was just that a slight mistake from our warrior who was supposed to AoE taunt. He didn't have rage,
Oh,
and that
jeez.
caused the loss of my life. Yeah, but we
The
recovered
uh
from it.
the 10
Yeah,
rage, I think, for challenging show.
yeah. So I
Jeez.
call him to go into defensive stance, and he would always blood rage, but he must have used it. Sometimes you get these things when you actually go into a pace run. Something so simple as using a blood rage and not realizing you need to save it did happen for him.
Hmm.
I was delaying my bop for like a solid 3 seconds. I was like, okay, I guess I'll just bop him then. He must have it. And then when I go in, I use nothing because he didn't communicate it at all. I just flop. But yeah, then our druid did the AoE stun gladly, and then we managed to pick it up from there. But yeah,
Jeez.
for
Yeah,
the
I
trash, yeah,
mean, yeah, just the like smallest little,
yeah. But
mistake there.
in general, the trash was really lackluster when it like compares to
Mhm.
other raids. Um,
Okay.
but for Lady Deathwhisper, I think the only fun stuff that we did was the frost resistance on the main tank. I'm not sure if that got fixed or something. This is not like a factor or whatever, right? I just heard some rumors that the frost resistance tech doesn't work on this boss anymore. But essentially, you
Okay.
just stack frost resistance on the tank, which is a DK in our case. just because it's it's the best thing to have for this boss when it comes to this threat. You just pull Frost Resistance and let the boss cast, and it should just keep casting Frost bolts and never apply the stacks. And you just occasionally drop the stacks because the boss was so busy casting those Frost bolts.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if this is fixed, but I think this is the only like fun stuff that we did on this boss. I think that's about it.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that. So I mean, did your DK hold it the entire time?
Yeah, the
Here?
entire time,
Okay.
and was
Yeah.
fairly stable to my memory.
So he must not have been getting the threat reduction. The one problem is like on this Warlock's UI, unfortunately, I can't really like see tank debuffs well. But
Yeah,
um
yeah.
yeah, yeah, I mean it looks like he has it the entire time. So I assume it was working fine or that or the rest of the raid was really good about like salving and using threat drops and tricks and everything.
Well, I think I would say this as like a self-criticism, but I think in our guild the salve usage is pretty poor
Oh,
of
really?
like what it could be like in a dream scenario, right?
Uh-huh.
But I think a big part of it is that we have some really good players on the threat transfer classes. Like there's a lot of good rogues out there. I'm not gonna take anything away from our rogue Serenity, but Hunter is a class that there's a lot of differences between players, like between good and bad hunters. Um, and that is something that our guild has the privilege to enjoy is that we've always had great hunters, like just world-class hunters, absolutely owners. I'm not sure like what the math about it is, but I definitely think that they had a good contribution on the tank threat on that fight.
Yeah, I mean any tank knows good hunters, good rogues, they make a world of difference. Like you go into a poll and like you start losing threat on some things and you're like, wait, what the hell is happening? And you look up and no tricks or MDs have been used. It's like it's such a night and day difference when you have like rogues and hunters that not only use tricks and MD constantly, but know like when to use it. Like when I'm playing my rogue, I just kind of know like the points in like fights or trash, whatever, where like the tank would want to have like extra threat there. And so like having that like tank perspective on rogue, I mean, I think it helps me a lot in helping other tanks when I'm playing my rogue.
Definitely, I'm not saying like these guys are like I mentioned earlier, we're not robots. So there's
Hmm.
definitely times where we have to scream like use the MD or use
Yeah.
the tricks. We have to dig up for it often, but especially in these race scenarios, they've been really on point historically. Um,
Yeah, it looked
I,
good.
I was I was really I was really comfortable the entire race pretty much.
So this gunship skip, I in a few of the runs I did, we were like trying to do this. We couldn't really get it to work. So I just wanted to go over this really quick. So everybody like mounts up together with like Crusader, maybe Crusader AM, and just runs over here. But then the ship's not here. You guys all jump off. Some people fall off. Some people it looks like got ported onto the ship, or what
No, so
exactly is going on there?
some people see the ship and some people don't.
Oh,
That's
okay,
the
okay.
crazy part about it. Yeah.
We did have
Um,
that issue on PTR. I remember.
yeah. So this was a classic case of it, right? Um, I think we have like 8 people or how many people, like 7 or something, like a notable amount of people just not do this, but we were really comfortable about this. We were aware that this will happen most likely, and aware of the mechanics of how the stuff works. But essentially, when the gunship combat starts, it teleports everyone in the whole instance into the ship, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
these people, since you can start the RP of the gunship, right, just fine, doesn't put you in any raid combat, so you're just good to run inside the raid. These guys run inside to get the food buff, yada yada. And then when the gunship finally, confronts the other ship, then they get boarded. It's extremely simple. We were really comfortable about this, like no stress about it at all whatsoever.
And I mean, this is like the perfect time for something like this to happen, right? Because you're going into like the easiest heroic in the raid and the next heroic, Saurfang. You have like the minute 45 second. Well, I guess with him walking, it's like over 2 minutes of RP total, probably. So this is kind of the perfect moment for something weird like that where people have to like die and run back, it feels like you don't really lose anything from it.
Yeah, it most certainly didn't shake us up at all. Like I'm so proud of the whole situation. Like everyone who was involved, like it was just complete chill. And then when you go into Anfal's stream and he has his webcam on, he's just like shaking his head. That was the funny part about it. But he obviously had this reaction, but it was fine the whole time.
Yeah, it looked like you guys were pretty in control and prepared for that to happen. There's not no crazy tech on Gunship, right? I think we can probably just skip this one.
Yeah, I think it's very, very standard stuff. I don't think I have the only notable stuff for this boss is that I was literally scratching my balls during the fight, just trying to relax before Deathbringer Saurfang intentionally.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was it's a nice fight to have in the middle of this raid, right? Which is pretty intense. Lady Deathwhisper is very intense, so it's nice to have that relief after
Mhm.
Deathwhisper, just to relax for a few minutes.
Nice little relaxing break partway through. Um, all right, so now we're on Saurfang. So you said this one was pretty shaky. I'm really interested about that. Like, what made this shaky for you guys?
So it's a very delicate fight, right? And it's extremely punishing. One mistake and boof, go again. Um, and it's a very healing intensive fight. And since we ran 4 healers versus other guilds that ran 5 healers, this was one of like our strong suits, obviously, for the fight that won us a lot of time. Before, for example, I think they ran 5 healers for like all fights except for Rotface or like Gunship, right? Um, we played 4 healers nearly the entire time. Um, apart from like Sindragosa, Valithria, obviously, and Lich King. So since it's such a healing intensive fight, I think that caused a lot of the shakiness. I think everyone, the healers especially, played super well here. I have nothing bad to say about it. It is not easy. That's for certain to do this fight with 4 healers this early on.
From what I watched all this stuff like really late last night, so I might forget some stuff, but I think this was a really clean. Oh, except there, Hunter died there. I forgot about that part. Other than that Hunter death there, he just died to a beast, right? I think it
Yeah,
was a pretty clean pull. Other than that, right?
yeah, it was. And like I said, we're not robots. Mistake like this can happen.
Sure, absolutely.
And there was no reaction to it. Let's get him up. We continue, and it's business as usual.
um. Anything you're doing different here? Personally, I do like Hodge, Podge for this. I'm not sure if you're doing that on here.
I was running the spec, the entire like a full chunk spec with 2 in Judgments of the Just and 1 in Improved Hodge for a 40-second cooldown.
Okay.
Um, this was mainly for Lich King, and Blood Prince Council for that matter, so I could apply the attack speed debuff by myself,
Hmm.
um, especially in the Shamblings, right?
Right.
But it was just convenient because it provided the Hodge CDR as well. In general, our Hodges wasn't really used constructively because it wasn't needed. They would obviously be like spot things. If that like we saw there's a blood beast that's high HP or a blood beast that's just yeeting somewhere, we'd hodge it instantly. I think our dynamic with the other paladins was really good with it. And then we'd obviously be throwing the hodges sometimes when we'd realize that we can, and then it would be ready for the next ones. I think
Hmm.
we also got pretty lucky with the marks that we got. Rogue, for example, right there got the 3rd mark, which is a rough one. And Rogue is like one of the best classes to ever get the mark because Feint works for that. Like you're essentially having a
Oh,
permanent
wow.
shield wall if you just keep it up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
This goes for
nuts.
all. This goes for all AOE reducing effects like the Feral Druid talent that
Okay.
just reflects area effect damage. Works for this mark, which is getting it on a rogue is just a lottery win. Just amazing,
Yeah,
really.
that's huge.
Yeah.
So did you go any points in like Divinity at all? I was curious
Yeah,
about
I've
that.
been I've been running 5 points in Divinity in
Okay.
almost all races except for like Nax.
Okay.
I was 5 out of 5 Divinity whole of Ulduar, and then in TOC I was 5 out of 5 Divinity for at least the first boss, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But I've been a big Divinity fan always, and I did play it on every single boss since I would have obviously had offensive second spec, but I had Holy as my off spec because I healed on Valithria.
Okay. That's good to know. I'm probably gonna be going the divinity route too, for my guild sprog. Let's see. Oh, went to the wrong teleporter there. So here, obviously, you guys are just hugging the wall, avoiding the Valks, going into Plague Wing. I think this is all pretty standard. You just pull the A bombs into the other trash, AoE everything down.
I was a big advocate for this like type of just go back by back, just keep the pace up, relieves a lot of stress, keeps the mind fresh for um, for bosses. I think this raid has like that importance because the bosses are such a big part of it, and not wiping clearly is like the winning recipe. And I wanted to emphasize that there was a lot of skips and stuff planned, and um, but they never ended up happening, and which was obviously in hindsight an extremely good choice decision. Since, like I said, the trash itself is fairly lackluster, and you don't save a lot of time apart from like the first part, right, where you just have so much trash. Um, this part, this part of the raid in particular is like trash heavy, and you have a lot of time that you have to sink into this, but it is so hard to pull it off in a way where you actually get all the bosses and get back and end up saving time. So, and then obviously you have to assess the risk of it as well. So we just ended up doing it pretty chill the whole way.
Mhm. I mean, it's kind of weird to say like you guys did slow and steady since you got the quickest clear, but that's kind of what the strat was. It seemed like just as you've been talking about, just play it safe, clean, get it done. Um, so Precious and Stinky here. I don't think there's any any tech there. Anything on Rotface at all? I'm guessing probably not.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I just tanked the boss with full offensive gear.
Yeah.
It shows greatness. Just smack it. It's like the only boss that I actually used my offensive gear for.
Uh-huh.
Um, uh, I don't think there is much to it. I do the dispels because I think it's a valuable global as a tank. Even though
Yeah.
if a healer did it, you'd gain DPS technically, but I just think that stability of it is important, and
Mhm.
I like to do it like that. I would spam the dispels on people.
Yeah. Just let the healers focus on healing, get that done, make sure nothing weird happens.
Yeah.
Um, Festergut, I was actually kind of interested in your guys' positioning here. I assume it's just to make malleable goo have to travel farther to get to melee to give them more time to react to it. Is that the case?
That is essentially it, yeah. Like there's nothing more about it, yeah.
Okay. Um, any tech here? Like this is we were talking earlier about like scripted cooldown usage. This is probably like maybe the most like scripted cooldown usage fight other than like, Lich King. Um, just with the way like the inhale blight works, when he's at 2-3 stacks, he's hitting super hard. Um, so I assume you guys just kind of had a scripted cooldown usage here that you're going through.
For for certainly, yeah. The only notable thing that involves tanking here that is kind of weird. I'm not sure. It's not very like uncommon necessarily, but we had a feral take 2 stacks there since the boss gradually hits for more, right?
Hmm.
So he can just find just in DPS spec DPS gear take 2 stacks for the damage buff, and then he refreshes it before it falls off. That was during like an intense period of like 2 or 3 stacks on the boss when it's like
Hmm.
meling at it hardest, just with a Bob AoE taunt. It's a magical debuff,
Yep.
so it gets applied through it. And then the second time he refreshes it, it's just with a PS and taunt with when the boss has like 0 or 1 stack. So
Right.
there's nothing notable about this really. I think there's a value having to paladin start the fight, obviously for its obvious reasons, but for the reason that you're able to use Hand of Sack on your co-tank, right?
Mhm.
during those 3 stacks. And a big thing that we were doing whenever people would fuck the spores up and lose a stack or two, is that we would just transfer to my group, and I would be the guy who rate sacks the explosion, right? And I would not
Right.
cancel, all right? So those guys would also have a sack, and that would save a lot of lives, especially on PTR. I think our spores on this race was really solid. I don't think we had any gaps to it, so that didn't that wasn't necessary, but it's something that you can do to save your pulls and whatnot. And I'd like to clarify that about the feral stuff, that if you're just a normal guild doing this stuff, it's absolutely not worth the hassle. Like, you're not gonna need it, and it just creates more confusion and potential wipe than you actually gain from it. It's just that something that we did because we're trying to go fast here.
Sure. Yeah, I think a good number of guilds are probably gonna try to do some of that, getting the gastric onto DPS stuff, but that is definitely good to mention. It when you're first learning this fight, it's added complexity that you don't really need to be doing. It's something you can maybe look to do once you've killed the boss a few times, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people have like play this game to raid and kill bosses, right? It's not to have these like competitions versus other people. So oftentimes a lot of people look at what top guilds do and they shouldn't, since they're just playing another game and should be doing other stuff, which is, respectable in like because there's different ways to play the game. This is just one of the small examples, especially this gastric bloat thing. It's just to don't put it on DPS. It's kind of vain. Uh, I wouldn't recommend it. Like, it's not particularly hard or dangerous. It's just vain. That's it.
Gotcha. Anything else here? I think we probably covered everything for Festergut.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything special here apart from like the utilize the group sack. That's really important to save some people.
Yeah.
Um, that's about it.
Yeah, that's definitely good to mention because I think a lot of prop guys like cancel their DSEC all the time. I would say probably the majority of the time I'm using DSEC, I leave on the damage transfer because I'm generally using it, to keep other people alive, not myself. Obviously, some of these bosses hit really hard. You do have to be careful when you're leaving like the damage transfer on. Obviously,
Uh,
like if you're taking like a Soul Reaper or something, like you may not want to due to the extra burst, but
well,
it,
Soul Reaper is a very specific thing because there's not really any other damage going on to the raid at that point. So
mhm.
doesn't really impact it. But a very very important thing is that, especially when you're playing double paladin, if you do not cancel your own raid sack when you're tanking, for example, you cannot get single sacked by the other paladin. It prevents it by like
Oh,
from
okay.
being used. Yeah. So it's like using your raid sack correctly, canceling or not canceling, it is like there is an art to it, right? You have to be aware of it when you need to do it, when you don't do it.
That's actually really good to know. I didn't know those couldn't stack like that. So Putricide here. I think you guys are generally kind of doing what I've been doing in my runs. The raid kind of starts on the green side here to try to drop the first slime puddles off to the side here so that the A-bomb is going to be kind of close to where the green ooze spawns.
Yeah, and just the base with our like tank decisions here, which is me tanking the boss with the paladin gaps, just doing his stuff with the abomination, is that it's just a better trade-off, obviously, because the paladin just takes less damage and does more damage. So it was very logical stuff. That's why the DK fits so well with the paladin for nearly the entire raid. You have these roles that the DK and paladin just kind of fulfill each other with. This is one of these examples. Other examples I would mention is Lady Deathwhisper. DK works beautifully on that, and Blood Prince Council obviously for Kalaset tanking. Just it's such a good tank. I would recommend it to anyone. Just the basis for this. Um, I don't think we did anything too strange here. I think the only tech part that that is important for like new people trying to progress this boss is make sure that your abomination user actually auto attacks the boss. Like a majority of the damage, like a big portion of the
Hmm.
damage comes from that. Some people just don't auto attack the boss. They just use the
Yeah.
the, the, the slash on it, right? So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, you pretty much double your damage, I think, right? Putting the auto attack
Yeah,
in there.
yeah.
Yeah, that's something I've been mentioning in my videos. So hopefully most people know about that stuff. But yeah, I try to mention that anytime we're talking Putricide or A-bomb, you
O-
spread the word.
On that topic, since it's like a very tank related stuff, we opt to not kind of favor the abomination damage here. A lot of the guilds are just kind of, I think they're too focused on it. Because oftentimes we just end up waiting in phase two anyway, and for that damage to happen, you have to keep the boss in very unoptimal places. In phase one, it's completely fine, and that's what we did, right? But whole phase two, the boss positioning is extremely relevant, how it impacts your raid with just the malleable goose and the gas vials, right?
Hmm.
So we opt out of doing that because it was completely useless. We'd have to wait anyway. So what's the point of it? Just making it more dangerous. Um,
That makes
for
sense.
tanking, I'd always leave the gas vials out of the green area where we are right now. That was like our general fighting area for phase two and phase one. It's just a very solid place. Just anchor yourself somewhere, and good stuff will happen. That's just a very good thing for a lot of bosses. Same thing we practice on Lich King for phase two. Is we have a very solid anchor spot, so to speak. There I go bait the puddles, and then I come back after the puddles are down. And the melee would always come on top of the tank because that ensures that no one will get hit by them, like 100%. Sure, you'll get some parries, but it's just something that is so stable, especially for a race. And if you're trying to progress this boss for the first time, have your melee stand on the tank a few seconds before the gas vials go out.
Okay, nice. Good tip. Good tip. Um, phase three. Anything interesting in phase three, or kind of just standard, like moving along the wall, tank swapping, probably at two, then three, then 1-1-1, or something similar to that?
Yeah, so we actually start the fight by giving 2 stacks to the Feral Druid. I think I have a very false image of this phase because our DPS is just extremely good. And this is something that a lot of guilds won't have the privilege of, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Um, like I said, my experience from fights is just different because that's just the way it is, right? If our DPS is better and we have to deal with what I think we had to deal with like 6 stacks total during the entire last phase. That's not gonna be the reality for a lot of people. A lot of people have to do some kind of party tricks to deal with the mechanic. So I'm a really bad person to ask about this last phase in that regard because I think I have a very false image of it. Um, but essentially DPS is so important on this fight in this last phase, well, in any phase for that matter, I guess, apart from the first. Just makes it kind of snowbally so much easier when you have high DPS. And that's, as a
Yeah.
tank, it's really important to enable that for your DPS, so you're not just doing some weird stuff, doing like a Pitbull Mr. Worldwide, guiding it around the room constantly, not
Hmm.
playing for your DPS, for your Enhajaman's totems, for your death and decays, for your traps, stuff like that. It's really important.
Hmm. Only moving when you like have to for like slime and the choking gas bombs.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So here everybody just switches onto their, movement speed stuff to get over to Bloodwing quickly. Is that about all that's going on here?
Yeah, I mean it's just a free usage of the TBC rocket boots. Like nothing game changing, but it's just a small thing, right? That's about it.
Yeah. I did like that you guys are so focused. You don't even care about this quest here. Like this warlock, he doesn't even pick up the quest. He's like, "We're racing. I'm right next to the quest giver, but I don't even care. We're going." So
Yeah,
that
we've
was just kind of interesting to me because in like my guild, everybody's like so obsessed with like getting all the emblems of frost and everything. So I thought it was just kind of funny that he doesn't even want to pick up the quest that he's like right next to.
well, so stuff like that is obviously in the bigger picture drops in the ocean, but I think
Right.
for the guild it's like the first clear is always sacred when it comes to stuff that like anything, whether it be achievements or these quests or whatever, like the realm first achievements, whatever, if it's not really related to the Warcraft log rankings, no one cares about it. That's what we're
Hmm.
going for. So a quest, it will hinder us. So that's
Yep.
like just a bad thing, right?
Don't even bother.
Yeah, yeah.
So here we've got the big pull we were talking about earlier. Was yeah, this is the one you died on here. So you mentioned earlier, I believe, Warrior was supposed to AoE taunt here, but he didn't have Blood Rage up, and so you ended up dying there. Was that correct?
Yeah, yeah, that is correct. But the lucky thing about me dying is that I used nothing. I didn't use my FAP, which is an incredibly powerful
Mm-hmm.
consumable on this trash just for the tacticians, right? Even if you have a on-off tank picking them up, obviously it's hard on a pull like this where I'm having a rogue just full send with the orb downstairs, tricks into me and stuff like that. There's no way a DK tank can do anything about that. So the FAP in general is extremely good. I recommend using FAPs on this trash, um, even if you're just doing it back by back. It's just so good. The stun is so brutal. I didn't use anything, so I had everything ready, and our Feral Druid and our Red Bala reacted very fast to it. And then I called armies to be used really quickly. Armies are super good on this massive pull as well. They buy you a lot of extra seconds. And then we just picked that up from actually getting that AoE taunt from the Paladin, sorry, the Warrior after that, if I recall correctly. And then I used my normal rotation of cooldowns and we ended up finishing the back just normal.
And yeah, they get the Balrez on you too there. Oh yeah, and I forgot your lock actually got choused up there by the technician. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, the FAP is key in this. Even on like 10 man when I'm doing this, I'm like popping FAPs on this pull. Even like when we're only pulling like the pat plus one of the sides, like we haven't even done the triple pull like you guys did there. But like this damage is like nuts on this trash compared to any other trash in here. So definitely recommend FAPs for people on that.
yeah, it's
Um,
something that hasn't been really utilized on private servers, like just as a consumable, on like non-vanilla private servers. That is. It was very heavily utilized in TBC Classic and now as well in Wrath Classic so far.
did you guys do anything interesting on Blood Princes? I think you actually tank it maybe a little. You guys tank it off to the side here. Um, what was kind of the reasoning for that instead of just like up on the stairs?
I think there was a general direction that people usually get knocked is that we wanted to go on this side just so that they would get knocked a certain way, and we would just like kind of pair melees up, run them against the wall, tank it obviously against the like close to the wall so they don't lose a lot of uptime. So they could just go to the wall and just get knocked around. Don't really care about it. Like you see two pairs of
Yeah.
people, like pairs of two people there. It would just create a lot of these things where we had to move less and we just get better uptime. That's about it. An interesting thing about this boss is that we used to three tank it before they changed it for the third PTR, which was the normal shock vortex of I believe it is Talram or
Valinar, yeah.
Valanar, sorry, yeah. Just a normal shock vortex that is now happening. Now it just goes somewhere in the room. It's kind of random, as you can see it happening now on the stairs.
Hmm.
But it used to just go around Valanar. Like if you tanked it in Africa, it will always go there.
Yep.
Um, so we run three tanks. So every time Valanar was not empowered, I would just tank it on the opposite side of the room, and the shock vortex would never be a thing for us. It would just never be a
Hmm.
thing. This was obviously a spiky movement from our tank here in our squad, so they got knocked a bit. I have to say this was a pretty intense moment within the boss fight, but gladly recovered from it. But yeah, the reason for the three tanking was just that whenever Balanar wasn't empowered, and then let's say Taldaram was, everyone just had full uptime on it, and the shock vortex would never bother you. You'd handle the
Hmm.
fire orbs like without any disruption at all. But then they changed it. Now it's like it is on private servers and whatnot. That it goes somewhere in the room, especially close to players. So then we just went back to the double tanking. As a prot paladin, it's really important when either like neither of your guys are empowered, and especially I keep tanking them in that corner. Um, you don't have anyone hitting them, especially the DKs. So you want to provide that attack power, attack speed, and attack power for that matter of indication by yourself on both of these mobs.
Hmm.
So since they do hit a lot, and there's a good chance of dying on this fight. It's a very very rough fight to solo tank two of them. I recommend three tanking this boss for all people who just want to progress and kill it. We obviously did it for speed reasons, just two tanking it.
Mm-hmm.
But providing those debuffs by yourself is really nice when no one is hitting it, no one is putting Frost Fever on it for the attack speed debuff.
Right. Yeah. I've mostly done it like 10-man heroic solo tanking, so I haven't really seen the 25-man damage, but I think that is probably a good move too, just based on what I've seen in 10-man heroic, kind of the damage they do. So
Yeah, they melee for around 25k per
yeah,
guy.
that's
So
that's pretty decent
if
when
you're
you
getting
got two.
yeah like two hits from both guys in a row, it can be very shaky. I think I ended up proccing at some
Mm-hmm.
point of this fight. I obviously was really scared because I went into the fight without a proc for a while because I had died right just on the trash before,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and this was a boss where I would regularly proc,
Mm-hmm.
so it was kind of heatening, so to speak.
Yeah, that's scary. It's always weird as a prop guy that 2 minutes of AD debuff, you just feel like immortal again.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you're no longer overpowered. You're like, oh shit, now I'm basically just a warrior. What do I do?
After tanking after tanking Lich King 25 heroic, I kind of got over that feeling though. I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just using my cooldowns on cooldown again, I suppose. That's how I thought
Mm-hmm.
about AD proccing all the time because it was so regular on that fight.
Mm-hmm. And I think here you just had somebody go up and like pull the pack in front of Lana'thel down back to you guys. Is that what happened?
Yeah, it was just the off tank going and picking it up. It was just to
Okay.
utilize again the orb on the rogue as you can see on the damage
Right,
meter.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's pumping. Um, anything interesting on land though? Did you do anything with the tanks like taunts to, each do a wall and like reduce damage, anything like that?
Yeah, so really important thing about the walls in particular is that always use them separately because let's say the tanking tank uses the wall, your off tank obviously is taking less damage as well since you're taking less damage. So if the off tank uses a wall while the main tank has a wall, it's kind of wasted. This is a boss where I would use reactive walls depending on like like 2 3 healers got the link. Something wrong happened that would require the extra attention of healers. I would just wall stuff like that. The bites are coming. Okay, I'm gonna wall so that they can. I would call it obviously and say just heal the bites, whatever, right? Um, Other than that, I don't think there's anything that special here. We have the DK start the fight because he can pump out so much burst threat and then I
Mm-hmm.
would receive zero. Like we would have both MDs on him, and then the rogue would tricks the warlock just for some stability. Um, that would create the situation where the warlock gets the bite first on very like you could very reliably do it. Just before the bite went out, I would taunt the boss, and I would be first on threat, then the DK would be second, and then it obviously goes to the third person on threat, like it's supposed to. One thing worth mentioning about this is that the bite goes off of the same logic as over aggro goes. So the range and melee factor are a part of it. So how is it called? The absolute threat.
Yeah.
So it is easier to track it. Like let's say you put your warlock in melee just to figure it out. If you're confused sometimes, like, but I was third on threat. Why didn't I get the bite? But yeah, some guy might be in melee and you might be in range,
Mm-hmm.
so that can affect it a lot.
Yeah, that's a good thing to mention. So that's probably it for Lanet though, right? I don't think
Yeah, it's a
there's
very
probably
very
too
basic
much.
simple fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Trying to remember what you guys did here for your pull. Let's see. For the Frostwing. Let's see. Did you do like almost the whole hallway? Or like half of the hallway at a time?
No, well, like I said earlier, this is like following the theme that we went on with the whole race, really. Like we just take it chill,
Mm-hmm.
pack by pack kind of thing. It essentially creates a situation where nothing can go wrong, and
Sure.
like the time gains are giga arguable for the risk you're taking. These trash in particular, you could develop some really big pulls, but
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of the AOE caps and such in place, it's like sometimes just not even worth it. Like you're just putting up such a high risk for such a low gain, essentially. Sure, it's fancy, sure, it looks cool, but like it's just not worth it often.
Yeah. And then at this point in the race too, you've done the rest of the run really clean so far. So like even more so like why risk it here when everything's gone so well already?
Yeah, well, it was agreed upon. Like we this was extremely agreed upon that we would just take our sweet time here. Here we did some summons and Hearthstone swaps for like we got a second druid in, like a second caster druid in for as our main boomkin went resto, and then we got another boomkin in for Valithria and Sindragosa. So we had like a little pause there before we kept pulling, just for the summoning purpose. We had to drop combat, and yeah, after these maps I will change to holy, and then our warrior would go to prot. Um, Valithria, for our in particular, wasn't really like a question of how are the DPS catered. It's more about how are the healers catered, since you know that determines the speed of it.
Hmm.
Um, but putting the warrior on the tank was something that made us lose no buffs at all, since we have the feral. So that was a very logical choice. And putting in more and more holy paladins for this fight was just a good thing. Instead of bringing something else, I just happened to gear myself and all that for this fight, and it was I had a fun time doing this thing where I healed it. But it's not hard or whatever, right? The funny part about it is that I'm a tank player, right? I'm the main tank, that I ended up topping the boss, like the
Yeah,
healing meter on it. Yeah,
little role reversal.
yeah. You can't obviously see it now here on the meters, but in the logs you can see it that
Hmm.
yeah, the good old Sacredi was top healing on this fight.
Oh, we love to see it. Um, anything interesting? I mean, I'm sure you had you organized like how the tanks would do this part, even though you weren't tanking it. Was there
Yeah,
anything
so
out of the ordinary here? It looks like kind of just tanks split up on each side and stacking things up.
yeah, so it was mainly for a warrior who I had to like kind of guide, since he's not a tank main.
Hmm.
Our DK tank just does his own thing, and there's not much more to it. But for a warrior, it is way more delicate, because there's some scary moments in this fight when you're tanking, especially the zombies. The I don't know how you would call them model, but the ones that explode when they die. Those hit like a truck, and you have to be very careful, and you need to actually use something every time you're face tanking them, and especially as a warrior, because you can do nothing from ranged. So you have to face tank them if you want to keep threat.
Hmm.
So he had to be well prepared for it. I tailored a spec for him. It didn't have deep wounds as an example. It should go more for cruelty and stuff like that, stuff for snap threat. And some adjustments in the prot tree would leave like the shield wall CD talent untaken, go for like improved thunderclap, stuff like that.
Hmm.
Just very small things, nothing notable really.
Okay. Here's the last. This is the big pump on Valithria, where you top the meters.
Yeah, you can
Um,
open the, if you're interested in that, you can open the Warcraft logs there. You can provide the information. Something I'm happily proud and happy about, because you know it was just like a side gig, so to speak. That's what
yeah,
kind of funny about it for me
yeah,
personally.
that's awesome. I'm actually gonna pull that up. Your logs are they gotta be public, right? At this point.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
public, absolutely. Yeah.
Um, let's see. World first pumpers, probably that one.
Yep.
Let's pull that over. Let's see the Credi healing. Oh my god, there it is. All right. You love to see it, dude. The prop pally turned holy pally. Topping
Notable thing.
topping the
not-
Valithria meter.
Notable thing is that Anfal as an enhancement did a relevant amount of healing as well. He's just a
Oh
pure
yeah.
enhancement. Yeah, he's an
Whoa, that's
amazing
actually
enhancement.
crazy.
Yeah, he's an extremely talented shaman player. He could just like he's extremely versatile when it comes to the class and within the specs. So it's a super dimensional spec, like deep dimensional spec. He would do this heal hand stuff. I think he did it on Sindragosa too.
Yeah, 5,000 healing per second from enhance. That is
Yeah,
fantastic. That's crazy.
yeah.
So let's see. How many did you guys use? One, two, three, four, five holy pallies, six, seven, eight, nine total healers. Okay. And then you've got Anfall that's like what, a quarter to a half of a healer. So
Yeah, so the big point of Anfal is that he would help outside, because like I said earlier, the damage can sometimes be a bit spiky and nasty.
mhm.
Especially since the abominations do their like frontal spew that gives the debuff, and then when all of your holy balances are inside the realm, you're not gonna have anyone dispelling, and then even if you dispel, you lose a lot of time. Like that's essentially like griefing someone who's like affliction warlock drain zoning the boss, like impact, since the roles are reversed here. So avoiding those things are really important. The abominations. Tip for tank is to turn them around. They do the frontal spew. Anfal was helping a lot outside with the healings just because of that, right? We only had our disc priest outside solo healing whenever the boys were inside the portals.
All right. I mean, I don't think there really can be any tech for this room, right? The Sindragosa little event thing.
Yeah, we had some unused tech that I'm not sure if I'm not sure if they like talked about it in the Sarth made a video with Anfal, just kind of
Oh
the
yeah.
same type of thing that we are doing right now. I think they went over the tech that we were gonna use. I'm not gonna talk about it. I'm not sure if that's like
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's public or not, or if it's been talked about it or whatever. But I think it got fixed and we didn't end up using for it. We just went basic. But it was some really interesting and fun stuff. Let me just tell
Okay.
you that. Um, it was something spectacular, I would say. Let's put it like that. I think
Um.
4 DKs here is really important when you can grip all of those
Yeah.
web weavers in.
Yeah.
It's really nasty on 10 man because you you get the same amount of mobs, but there's no chance in hell you're gonna have 4 DKs in that web.
Yeah. It's so annoying as a tank in that room, just having those spiders like that just sit there and spam scarabs.
The
Like
good
not
part
being able
about
to
it is
group
that
everything just drives me crazy.
the good part about it is that these spider mobs aren't in particularly dangerous. Even if they're hitting clothies, even if the melee ones are hitting clothies, they don't really do much.
Yeah, yeah, they honestly don't even really need to be picked up. If you are ever able to in the future talk about that tech you were alluding to there, though, I would love to hear about it if you're able to talk about it at some point down the line.
Yeah, sure. Like, there's a chance that I might be able to do it even now, but I don't want to do it because
Sure.
I don't want to get in trouble if
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not able to. That's just like a precaution, so to speak.
absolutely. Totally understand. I don't want to get you in trouble,
Yeah.
but yeah, if you ever get the green light to talk about that, I would definitely love to hear about that. Uh,
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
these two, just pulling them together, and then are you guys gonna just run out of the room here? I can't remember exactly what you do here. When to like reset Sindragosa?
No, so why we're there is that we want the corpses to be there because the
Oh,
top of
right, right,
those
right.
stairs is somewhere where you will never get a frost blast and it will
Sure.
never happen. Essentially killing those dragons where they are like doesn't really benefit at all because you're gonna have the RP after they die anyway.
Yeah.
So here like the pulling we just pull them, right, like we don't really lose a lot of uptime. All we do is we gain the little chance that the blast would go inside the corpse and someone would die. That's about it. Um,
Right. And then these like
Nothing more
frost
special to it.
patches too would kind of
Yeah, they're,
persist
they're
into the
pretty.
fight, I believe, as well.
Yeah, those frost patches, by the way, they're pretty dangerous. Like you're gonna have two of them landing on your melee, and if they just
Hmm.
suck, they'll die. Like literally.
Yeah, and you can't actually blessing of freedom through them too, which is kind of crazy. They just like
Yeah,
slow you no matter what. So yeah, really important to get both these frost patches and the corpses so they don't hide the
yeah.
bombs in the air phase. So then you guys are gonna just mount up, immediately move over to the balcony, and how much frost res did you end up going with for this fight?
I can't remember the exact amount, but the stuff that I used was I used the Onyxia ring. Obviously, I would only use the 25 man version since you can use both, right? You can use 25 and 10 man. I didn't opt in to use the 10 man ring. Not that I had it, but I wouldn't have used it anyway. I just wanted to um, have the extra strength from the Trader King ring. I opt to use the Trader King instead of Fate's Clutch here. Fate's Clutch has a good argument on this fight, just because that's the Thorim expertise ring for anyone who isn't aware of the item name. Um, it has a good argument on this fight because the boss does parry heist. So having the extra expertise is nice. And I didn't really have room to use Cliff of Seal of Vengeance. I was running Divine Plea, the Taunt Cliff, and Salvation. just because I went full ham on chunk this whole race. All bosses I used those glyphs. The whole race I used the same talents, and it was so stable. The reason why I want that extra strength is to create some kind of buffer for the last phase, so I can just purely salve myself, use that as a defensive, and our hunters did a good job at keeping me at that kind of buffer for the last phase.
Mhm. Yeah, it's definitely
But
a huge trade-off because, like, all expansion, we've had, like, kind of insane threat with, like, the sort of gear we've been able to use, but especially in this fight where you're getting, like, attack speed slowed on top of, salve being a really important damage reduction cooldown, wearing a lot of gear that makes you do less threat, being able to pick up, like, value threat where you can, definitely important.
this is an extremely minor stuff, but we had the helm enchant, obviously for the frost resistance, cloak enchant for frost resistance. I didn't use any frost resistance items um, apart from that, right? And then our DK did have full frost resistance. Just it's like arguable for the last phase because we do the strat where we swap every time, like as soon as possible we do swap to keep the stacks as low as possible. But if anything goes wrong, he has the option, to be extremely tanky and prolong the fight. If something happens to me or whatever, right? Or there's an oopsie or whatever, I DC, anything can happen. It was just a thing where a DK tank isn't really going to do a lot of DPS, so sacrificing the gear pieces for the frost resistance was kind of whatever. But yeah, I ended up putting full frost resistance on him.
Okay, interesting. So, sorry, did you say you were leatherworking for this or no?
I was dual crafting.
Oh, crafting? Okay.
Yeah, the difference nowadays is completely fine. I don't judge people who go leatherworking. I just didn't feel like I wanted to use it, um, like instead of the stamina. It's fine on the helm since you get so much resistance for the stamina,
Sure.
but you lose like a lot of stamina for the resistance when you're leatherworking. Sure, it's fine, especially on Sindragosa, it's more fine. On Lich King, I wouldn't do it since the portion of the necessity of excess shadow resistance isn't really present. Once you reach you just reach a little quota amount, which is like the cloak enchant, the helm enchant, the onyx ring. You don't really need it. Like it gets you to a level of safety where you're completely fine with the soul reapers, especially with a well planned cooldown rotation.
Mhm.
So I didn't really feel like it was necessary. And then JC obviously just for the extra 3 stamina
Mhm.
over JC stamina enchant.
So here you guys switch sides. This is where you guys are gonna push phase, I'm guessing. So you want to move over here, give people more space for phase 3 or phase 2, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point.
And you tank it for a long time here, I believe. I remember.
It's essentially just first Froststone happens, then the DK tank gaps just resets his stacks and then comes to pick it up. I tend to use a super early wall here because I
Mhm.
usually got it for the last phase. I found out that the first Frost Beacon usually ended up happening the most unstable when it came to healing received. I don't know what the
Mm.
reason was, but it was just convenient to first of all get the ability on cooldown and get to utilize it on the most shaky point. So that was something that I noticed, at least for us. I don't know if it's a general thing, but yeah, that was just my experience about it. Um, then the DK tank would taunt and I would reset. We would reset very often. I mean, sorry, swap very often, every time we could essentially, unless like the DK had a IBF or I had a wall on, then we would just time the switch to the end of that CD. But that's about the only exception. We would do it as often as we could. It was really stable when it came to that damage taken.
Yeah, it looked like you guys handled it super well here. I don't recall any like scary moments.
Maybe towards the end there was like a splash of an ice tomb. I think it's about to, yeah, it happens just before the boss dies. Like there you can see the warlock get frozen as well. Or was it this? No, no, this is like it's just before the boss dies essentially.
Okay, a
Um,
little bit
it's a
lower.
very minor thing, nothing in
Oh yeah,
particular.
yeah. I just saw it right there actually.
Our Sindragosa was extremely stable in general. I was very proud of how we did it. We had a lot of difficulties at start, but ended up being really, really good on that boss. I enjoyed it a lot, and it felt super chill. I think people really over exaggerate how hard this boss is when you just standardize stuff like the tank swappings or like some kind of healer rotation of who keeps healing, who doesn't. Um, just proactively using bubbles if it's necessary. Um, don't be afraid to call Leon hands here. Like just commit them as like a cooldown, just for the physical damage taken reduction. Just like simple stuff like that.
Mhm. So we see here 2 people hearth out and leave. Do you recall, like, what swaps he made here for Lich King?
I think it's our DK tank obviously goes to his paladin, and then it is our second druid gets swapped out for something. I can't remember who came instead of him.
Okay. Oh, actually, it looks like a third person swapped out too. Um, okay. So now we're at the fun part, Lich King. We're finally here. Were you like super nervous at this point? You're like, okay, the run's gone so well up to this. Now, you just gotta close it out.
Well, I feel like I mentioned earlier, we pulled the boss so many times that I was like completely muscle memorized the whole fight when it comes to my part. And that's all I care about. Like, how well can I do this? If someone else plays well or plays bad, I can't really affect it, right? I can obviously try to sometimes spot their mistake as like a support role player, but very familiar with the stuff. And we were like, had every stone turned basically when it came to this fight. We've experienced all the stuff that can go wrong and how deep you can really push the berserk. Like, we would literally sometimes wipe um, like on purpose. We'd just have the boss berserk and we'll just see how long we can kite it. And we wouldn't have a single person die the entire berserk until the harvest soul became. Because obviously
Wow.
when the harvest soul becomes, he is berserk and then he will like one shot everyone when he does the ability.
Hmm.
Because you know that damage is amplified too and it's unavoidable.
Sure.
Yeah, we had every stone turned. Didn't really feel like bad. One notable thing here is for early progression is that only utilize one plague and try to not have as many ghouls as like try to have as few ghouls as you can just to
Hmm.
minimize the stacks on the boss because there's so much rooms and party tricks the ad tank can do just to like survive two shambling horrors at the same time even if it's getting rocky like I had an unfortunate math formula here where the plague ticks on the first shambling, it ticks it below 20%, and then the other shambling gets the necrotic plague. So that means I'm
Yeah.
having to tank it for 20 seconds at a minimum. Unluckily, if it goes on a ghoul, then it can be like a disaster, right? But I called the ghoul to be toned away from me just to avoid that possibility to even happen.
Hmm.
You know, so our other tank taunts the ghoul off of me, and then I just wall and combine that with a hodge, then that covers that whole situation. So avoiding those extra stacks is really important. Bouncing the plagues in between the horrors, that's what I recommend because it just minimizes the stacks on the boss. You essentially gain value out of every single time that your plague is ramping up instead of just trying to ramp it up to have high value. Like I don't think there's a rush in killing these mobs. The only oopsie on this fight I did was that I was like really desperate for a ghoul. We had some over aggro issues with those ghouls, and I used my righteous defense on a ghoul just as the boss tank over aggroed a ghoul.
Hmm.
And sometimes that would just taunt the boss, and it was really shaky. Um, but luckily, this was a lottery win. I taunted three healthy ghouls away from the raid, and they all stuck on me. Like I've never had like the enjoyment of like having such an easy time with the ghouls after the second shambling dies, because that would kind of be like a rope dance thing, where everything would be dead because I haven't been getting any ghouls on me. Um, and then sometimes I just have the plague jump on me and barely reach a newly spawned ghoul, and that newly spawned ghoul wouldn't even be delivered anywhere. I just have to have that plague bounce on me again, and then I'd rocket boots to the fresh shambling that spawned. It would be really shaky at times, but this was like a lottery when it came to that accidental righteous defense. Nothing to complain about that.
Yeah. I've put a lot of pulls into this on 10 man, not 25 yet, but like the difficulty of actually like getting those ghouls over to you with taunts with the amount of cleave that's happening. Being able to get 3 of them at once, that's actually insane. That hasn't happened a lot for me. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, especially since we run the 4 unholy death knights, those are like the biggest criminals when it
Mm,
comes to
yeah.
overaggroing those schools. They can't really necessarily do anything about it either. That's just their
Yeah, they
like
just got a
damage.
pump,
And
right?
and we obviously had the thing where we would on purpose use pestilence just to get Epon Plague Bringer up on the Shambling Horror. So that
Mhm.
affects the necrotic plague disease
Yeah.
damage they can debuff. Um, so you necessarily couldn't even avoid it really. Um, so it was just an unfortunate situation sometimes. Here, like I said, we use this anchor spot, right? Like the part where you teleport into the room, like kind of the grand jewel of that metallic figure in the platform. Um, just the tip of that would be our anchor, like our home base. Since it's good to establish something that you'll always bring it to a certain location, because then the death and decays, then the fire elemental totems, yada yada, they're always in the same spot. It just maximizes the damage up a lot, allows you to spread out your warlocks like this on different sides, since they know that they'll have ranged on the boss. But yeah, there's two periods in this fight where I do one where I do and one where Caps does. We do kind of move the boss to the side a bit since it's a period where the defile happens safely before the Valks, so we just kind of bait it out of the way. Oftentimes the defile happens just before or just after the Valk, so you can't really pre-position it. As a tank, it is extremely brutal if the defile goes on you during these things. You have to be so ready for it. Like like it is the ingredients for chaos if the tank isn't prepared for it, or if the raid isn't prepared for the tank getting it, since it is most certainly not going to be an optimally placed file, that is for sure.
Yeah, I experienced that a few times last night when we were progging our heroic 10 man, and my alerts weren't like set up correctly, and it was just chaos when it chose me
Here,
at the same time I needed to like taunt a Soul Reaper and Hodge of Valk. It was also like defiling me like right in that same window.
yeah, it is extremely brutal. I think the worst that I got on PTR was 3 defiles on me in a row,
Oh,
and
Jesus.
they were all like hard defiles. They weren't like just the one that was dropped here. If you want to roll back a bit, this was the one of the defiles, the only defile where I positioned the boss to the side so we can drop it there. If it goes on me there, it's like doesn't really matter. That one that goes on Gabby there, it doesn't really matter if that goes on me. But when it's the hardest ones, then it's a bit shaky, especially if I've had to use my thing. But yeah, the defile happens here like solid 8 seconds before the Valks. We have a good time here getting to the anchor spot before the Valks go out. So just get it out of the way safely. Get back to our spot.
And we were talking earlier about like the Seal of Justice stuns here too. Like that's
Yeah,
something that's pretty huge. Maybe not a lot of people know about that, but Seal of Justice procs like a 3 second random stun that doesn't DR with other stuns. So you can get if you DR it like 3 times, I think it's was it 4 point or 5.25 maybe? Full 5.25 seconds of stun if you proc 3 of them back to back to back.
yeah, it is most certainly big, and but the important thing about it is that you cannot go to the seal, or if you go, you cannot melee those mobs before like the actual stun rotations are done, because you'll just end
Hmm.
up proccing it while the stuns are there, and then you just waste it. So
Right.
big thing is obviously again is to prioritize the targets that are high HP, um, since you might have some leeway on those others that aren't as high. They won't necessarily need the stun. So in the case of bad RNG, if you just end up hitting it until it's almost about to fall off and then you proc it, then you'll turn that stone. But Judgment seems to proc it really often. Um, it's not 100%, but that is like the ability that would yield like very high percentage of stun application with Seal of Justice. And
Yeah, I think that's because both the judgment and the judgments of the just can both proc it.
yeah,
I think that's the reasoning for that. But yeah, like we say random stun. Oh, I actually wanted to pause here because I think there was something to talk about here. But um, Yeah, like we say random stun, but it's actually so reliable to get this stun. Like you said, don't switch your seal until like the actual like controlled stuns have like been used. But I feel like anytime I put on Seal of Justice, within a couple seconds, I get a proc. Like it's so damn reliable every time.
The only like bad RNG, like people think about this. If I say bad RNG, they think that it's not gonna proc, but um, the bad RNG is that it's not gonna proc, but that happens like I don't know 5% of the time. It's so rare.
Yeah,
You don't have to like kind of
it
rely on
never
it at
happens
all.
really. Like
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever had a time where like I put on Seal of Justice and it didn't proc for me. Like I haven't pulled this boss as many times as you have, but in my experience personally, like if I put Seal of Justice on, like I'm getting the 3 procs I want from it by the time the Valk, gets to the edge.
yeah. I think we had like one scenario where we would have like both me and Gabs were smacking one mob that was kind of offside, and then we would have been completely fine if we had Seal of Justice proc on it even once, but ended up losing the player because neither of us just procced on it, and it was like the only time that I can recall it being not reliable, and that was crazy. Like because obviously when you're tanking the boss, you don't kind of have to since the other paladin is doing that job, and it's not necessarily a good thing either because threat is a really important factor on this fight since you're using salves and how the valks work since they can't grab the second person on threat. Um, we actually ended up having our off tank getting grabbed because someone went above him on threat to be the second.
Oh wow.
Um,
I actually didn't know that
fortunately,
was a thing. That's crazy.
yeah, fortunately it was a really good timing, so it didn't really impact anything. He wasn't using his sacks on me, or he was not taunting the boss, because he does take 2 Soul Reapers of his own. Um, so it was a very good timing about it, but could have been a disaster um, if it was a bad timing. But yeah, sometimes I'd also proactively swap to Seal of Justice if I just saw that Caps isn't proccing it, like he's just not proccing for him, then I'd do it as well. It's completely fine to do it. It doesn't affect your survivability as long as you don't turn your back or whatever and keep pressing your holy shield. But I recommend you have to be very comfortable with the boss to know when you need to do it as the tanking tank.
Yeah, in 10 man, I've been running with like a blood DK, so I'm always like following the Valk attacking it. And also just in 10 man, like our damage is like a little bit lower for some of these checks. So just my added damage to the Valks is kind of important. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what we've been doing in our 10 man. I've like regardless of if I'm tanking Lich King or not, I at the same time I need to be handling the Valks as well.
Yeah, it can be no pun intended, quite a handful at times. Um,
Yeah, like I love this fight so much because there's so much going on for the tank on this fight. Like it feels like such a rewarding fight. Like when you do your part correctly on this fight, because there's just so much going on for the tank at like almost all times.
but like I said, once you just pull it and pull it and pull it and get comfortable with it, once your healers know when you're taking damage and you can really like rely on them, it's extremely scripted. Like there are some like changing factors like getting the file or having healers grabbed, but that's about it. There aren't really many. Like everything else is super scripted. Sometimes, rarely, there's like an offset when it comes to the Soul Reaper, or usually when it's doing like a set of 3 abilities where do an infest into a defile into a Soul Reaper. Like Soul Reaper would always be the last in line, but sometimes it would just do it first or second. And especially with the shield wall, you want to use it just before you know that it's going to be. So it covers the application, the explosion, and the buff on the boss. Sometimes it would just kind of caught you off guard, and that's why the AD was so nice, just for that slight possibility of it. It's rare, but it would happen sometimes. I think this has been a very like classic thing in no pun intended again in whole classic when things are like windows instead of scripted times. Um, just these like kind of random offsets. So that's why the AD was in particularly nice for this.
Hmm. So here I pause it here. I believe this is where something goes wrong with the hunter. I think he disengages the wrong way and falls off.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
right there.
essentially we have this thing where the hunters would like keep a track record of whenever they would fail or not fail. Like let's say they're like 7 out of 9 or whatever, like successful jumps.
Mhm.
Whenever they would fail, it would essentially reset. So Talas at the moment is fortunately 0 out of 0 right now. He had the fortune of not being grabbed, so to speak. Stead, luckily he's 1 out of 1. But yeah, solid play from both of our hunters.
Also, that jump there is, like, so scary. You guys obviously have it, like, perfectly timed, but, like, when the platform's, like, not even up and they do the jump, I was
Essentially,
like, "Oh god, is it too early?"
essentially when the boss finishes its cast, when it's done, you can jump. Whenever
Okay.
nothing is shown.
That's what you're
Yeah.
looking for? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. When the boss finishes the Remorseless Winter cast, when it starts the whole thing, when that timer goes to 0 and it finishes, then you can jump.
Okay. That's great to know. And so I heard some things about the Raging Spirits on this transition too. There's, like, just kind of some RNG and whether or not you get 3 of them or 4 of them here. How often did you guys experience that, like, only getting 3?
So this is correct, yeah. That is absolutely the case, but getting 3 was fairly rare and just not could not figure out what causes it. And looking at old videos from like actual Wrath, it seemed the case as well. Like it would sometimes spawn 3 there as well. And that's like returning to what I said just like a moments before, is that in Classic a lot of abilities are working on windows, right? You have a certain window where an ability can occur, and if something is just delaying it a lot. Um, Maybe that's the case. I don't know. That's just a guess, right? Haven't found anything about it, but yeah, that is the case. It sometimes happens. I don't know if anyone has had it happen on live, but if it happens, it is like makes the last phase so much more easier. Not that it's like mechanically hard, it just makes the DPS check a bit easier. Not even a bit, a huge stun.
Right. Would you say that's the hardest part of the fight is that phase 3 transition as you're entering phase 3, like, getting those 2 Raging Spirits down?
Um, I don't really think so. It's just dealing with them and then having them around is completely under control. It's just about it affecting the DPS check, I think. Um, One thing importantly, if you have 2 spirits up when you're going out of the Frostmourne phase, we would always call our Raging Spirit tank to use wall like a second before the Frostmourne phase ended, because sometimes you just get clapped in the head. 2 Raging Spirits smacking you at the same time, you just get one shot, and then shrieks at the same time or something. You just want to pre-wall that because there's like no healing on you. The defile is going out. You can't like stay still and cast and turret on the tank necessarily. So
Right. Yeah, that's a
that
really
is like
good
the
thing.
only that is like the only dangerous part when it comes to those spirits, is just coming out of the first Frostmourne, but that's about it.
Yeah, I wanna point out there too, you guys had, like, Lich King super far away from them as well. So one thing we ran into, I'm guessing this is kinda why you do it, is, on top of just Vile Spirits, but, coming out of the Frostmourne room, we would have people just get, like, insta-gibbed regardless of, like, which direction the Raging Spirits were facing. So we'd, like, tried to keep the raid, like, away from them coming out of the Frostmourne room. Is that part of why you guys had them so far away?
Yeah, it's exactly the reason. I mean, where the boss is, um, as itself, right, shouldn't matter at all, because we are not supposed to be doing damage on the boss. Obviously, keeping it
Mhm.
as close so that the warlocks and such and the shred priest can put dots on it is very important, since those globals are so valuable. Putting the dots and getting value from them, but yeah, just placing the boss far away so it sucks the people away from the spirits, since those stay in place during the whole thing, just so that whenever we get out, no one is getting insta-clapped. We're away from them and in complete safety.
Mhm.
Um, Weird thing coming out of the Frostmourne is that we would encounter this even on live. Um, DBM didn't fail this time, but on PTR we had some real weird shit happen with the Defile coming out. Like even now, every time it would target me the whole time, it would keep his blade, anchored to me when it's doing the casting, but it would still do it on someone else. Now this time DBM was working and it would show the target correctly, but on PTR we would have it like DBM shows that it's on me, the WeakAuras show that it's on me, everything shows that it's on me, targeting me, it's facing me, everything. and then it would just go on someone else randomly. That
Oh,
would create
weird.
a lot of issues. Yeah, and that bug came in like midway of our ALK journey. It wasn't there all the time. But now it's like very common. But yeah, on this race, it would still target me, but the DBM luckily was working. Um, One time it occurred to us that it cast the defile on me right out of the thing, just normally. This was, I think, was the first time when the bug started to occur. It would cast the defile on me, and just before it ended, it recast it on Hadouken, actually, whose point of view you're watching. It would recast it on him. It would do a new cast. It was so weird, like, could not figure out what was causing that to happen. It would always be associated with the boss tank, though, like the defiles being kind of fucked up. I don't know what caused it to happen, but yeah.
Hmm, interesting. Did you guys watch back any like old classic videos and see that, or old Wrath videos and see that happening back then too?
Yeah, we were obviously trying to dig that up since watching private server videos is essentially completely useless because
Hmm.
like you have no confirmation if that code is like there. I mean, it's kind of the same thing for like even the real game back then because a lot of the stuff works differently. Like they nerfed target dummies so that you can't target dummy Lich King, which is absolutely big thing. I think it's a really important change because it kind of defeats the purpose of the fight and how you're supposed to handle stuff if every single tank mechanic is handled by dropping
Yeah.
a timed target dummy or a few. I really like the change. Obviously, it works on Shambling Horror still, which is kind of useful. Not that groundbreaking, um, but the same thing. This was from the start, like this never worked, unlike target dummies. Hunter Thought doesn't work on this, just like a lot of other bosses um, in Wrath, which is like the private server meta was just like ping ponging stuff with Hunter Taunt constantly, because you could essentially taunt anything with a Hunter Taunt. Lich King in particular is a really funny one that isn't able to be taunted. It just shows that there are differences between the stuff. Is that the famous legendary Uso taunt clip, right? Uso was a hunter, and he taunted the boss after they got out, and then the boss went berserk, so they could kite it. There's a hunter taunt the boss, but that was not the case in classic. You could never have a hunter taunt the boss ever in any period of the PTR.
That's the Paragon video you're talking about, the
Yeah,
world first,
yeah,
just to clarify for
yeah,
people.
yeah,
And coming out here, this is where he berserks up? Yeah, right here. Yeah, he's
yeah.
berserked now. So now you guys are. This was like so well played. You guys are perfect here. But like you said, you had practiced this quite a bit, so this probably felt pretty normal.
Yeah, so essentially the kiting pattern that I was doing was to immediately start running towards like kind of the opposite edge, so I could kind of like edge it out to the opposite side of the platform from where we started. And about when I do that movement, he's on the opposite side. If I kite it directly there, it doesn't leave a lot of room for me to move. I could potentially die, so I have to kind of curve around it. Curve around, kite it to the other side, then it would cast Wild Spirits. Meanwhile, this is happening. The off tank is obviously handling the wild spirits that were there, um, while just before the last Frostmourne room was done. Then I used the end of my rocket boots to go back to the side that we came from. This ensures that the boss is essentially walking through the raid both ways. So you're maximizing output from the DPS since it's not an optimal thing to be moving the boss like this. But in the guild we call this the 305 Mr. Worldwide when you're like kiting stuff all over
Nice.
the place. So this was like a Mr. Worldwide thing, but you kind of have to do it here. Um, our DPS was better here than the rest of the things. So the like intensive ping pong, so to speak, on like the end, we're just ping ponging a lot just to keep it like kind of close to the range, so they would just blast as much damage as possible here. Like you would have caps taunt me taunt, ghosting taunt, then I would taunt back. I was actually really greedy about this like end sequence compared to what it was on PTR. There I would just like edge it out to the max just before it would hit the guy who had the boss. Here, like I have it and Caps takes it, Ghosting takes it and I take it back, and then Caps takes it now, and then I'll take it back from caps just to keep it out in range of the warlocks again, and then we get the defile and it's over. But yeah, there is a method to this madness. There's a logic to it. People thought that it was like kind of improvised or whatever, but it was completely under control and conscious.
Yeah, I mean, that was perfectly executed. And like you said, you guys practiced it and obviously it paid off. Because, like, I mean, you got 5% to go here, or I guess 4.5% when you're coming out of the Frostmourne room. And, like, I don't think anybody dies here also while you're, like, doing this whole thing. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
somebody does.
yeah. No, we had 0 deaths during
Okay,
it.
yeah,
So, but
0 deaths
that was,
during this. Like, that's super impressive. Doing 4.5% of, like, Berserk to Lich King with 0 deaths. Like, so well executed.
I think our like highest was like 8 or 9%.
Oh, jeez.
During Berserk. Yeah, yeah. Because you have a lot of time and the damage you do is a lot. But this was like back when before they changed the resting. Is that okay? Like the Harvest Soul would happen at like 18 or 19%, but then we'd have a few Warlocks start and clapping it instantly because they would do the Soulstone deck that got fixed. Luckily, I'm really
Mhm.
happy about that. I'm really happy about the combat resting that they changed. I like that they make this boss punishing because for us, example, we got punished. The hunter fucked up. We did the whole last phase without him, which shows
Mhm.
that it's obviously not as hard of a DPS check as people thought it would be. Like we would do this with 2 DPS dead, I think, on our best pull, this last phase.
Wow.
But that was obviously under the condition that you'd have 3 Raging Spirits spawn. I don't think it would
Mhm.
be that much possible if that thing didn't happen. But yeah, it's definitely doable with when you have people dead towards the end. So this is something that if you yourself are there progressing at some point, don't doom about someone failing their disengage or whatever. Just keep playing. This is a perfect example of it. Never stop playing. Like even if
Mhm.
something bad happens like that, just don't stop playing.
Yeah, so, like, on Algalon, this was sort of the same thing. Like, we had kills, I think, up to, like, 6 minutes, 45 seconds, something like that. And, like, he berserks at 6 minutes, so that's, like, 45 seconds of, like, kiting Algalon around and, like, some really, really
Yeah,
scuffed pulls. Um, but a lot of people just think of, like, berserk timer as, like, "Oh, hard stop," like, we just lose at this point, but I mean, as you guys showed here, there's like so much room to like make plays here, and like you guys didn't even have a single person die during that. Like it's insane. So like huge takeaway. Like it's not over when he berserks. Like keep playing for sure.
yeah. Oh, it's only over when it does the harvest souls after he has
Hmm.
berserk. 'Cause then that you know it hits you for like 30k per tick, so it's like completely unavoidable. You can't do anything about it. The only thing you could do is that if you have like a Prot Paladin proc on the first tick and you have someone take a Soulstone just like the millisecond after he dies and stay up, then you could have definitely had that person delay the boss despawning for a second, but that obviously isn't the case anymore. Doesn't really matter because the boss isn't taking damage when it harvests souls, then it's just
Hmm.
GG. Like you'd have to be like within inches of killing the boss for that to do any relevance. So it doesn't really matter anymore.
Right. All right. I mean, man, that was awesome. Um, I'll let you go to bed. I know it's late for you. I really appreciate you talking to me, though. That was amazing. It was really awesome to get all your insights on everything.
Yeah, I'm very honored to be here and get asked to do this. I had a very nice time doing this with you. I have much respect for you and your content.
Oh, I mean, thank you so much. Like, obviously, I think the world of you. Like, being a main tank in a world first, like, speedrun guild, like, the, the amount of pressure on you, or like the amount of practice that goes into that, like, executing everything the way you guys did, especially, like, I mean, that Lich King like berserk taunting at the end. That just I mean, that says everything. Like the amount of like practice you guys did, just executing everything well, even under the pressure of, racing and yeah, you're obviously an incredible tank and it was so good to get a chance to talk to you.
Yeah, I uh, I definitely had a nice time. It was like first time doing anything kind of public like this. I'm a very private person, but it's very important for me to actually enjoy and respect the person. to do anything like this, because I don't really like cloud hunting and all that. I like this educational stuff.
Well, I really appreciate that. I mean, that's the best compliment I've ever gotten, I think, within the game for sure. But yeah, thank you so much for talking with me. I look forward to hearing more from you in the future, watching more of your races. And if you are able to talk about that Sindragosa trash event tech at some point, definitely interested in hearing about that.
Sure, I'll get back to you about it. It's really fun stuff, actually. Thanks for
All
having
right.
me, and we'll be seeing you around.
Yep. Thank you so much for doing this. I'll talk to you
Yeah,
later.
yeah. Cheers.